the present time, we know that there's 27 people missing since about 4:15 yesterday afternoon.
Still no break in that Chowchilla, California school bus kidnapping.
26 school children and their bus driver have vanished.
Vanished yesterday afternoon near Chowchilla, California. President Ford directed the Attorney General to use all available government resources. The California National Guard joined state, local police, and the FBI in a giant search for the children and the driver.
It was like somebody come down from Mars and just took them up off the planet.
Was it an outright kidnapping? A psychopath or sex maniac on the loose?
Whoever did it put a great deal of planning and effort, and we might even say money.
There may never have been as anguishing a mystery.
It's the worst kind of story you could tell. Being buried alive is our worst fear. The Chowchilla kids showed the world what childhood trauma really does to a person.
My childhood ended July 15th, 1976.
I will never get back the kid that I was. That kid stayed underground. That happened for each and every one of us.
Chowchilla is in Central California. It was very small town USA.
Chowchilla is a place where time can seem to stand still, but there's always something that needs to be planted or harvested as the cycle of life continues.
By the time I was there in 1970, it was mainly cattle and farming. They had a fair and a rodeo.
1246.
Each year they had a cattle drive right through the center of town.
My dad was a world champion steer wrestler. I was raised right, really, to believe in God and cowboy. At an early age, I knew I wanted to be a rodeo cowboy like my dad and his friends.
Chowchilla was a wonderful place to grow up. We'd catch frogs, we'd go roller skating down the hills, go play in the mud, in the irrigation ditches. The town had no crime at all.
You didn't have murders. You didn't have a lot of big cases. It wasn't uncommon to go all night long on a graveyard shift and the phone not ring one time.
In Chowchilla, the children could develop a sense of basic trust, and that is an important foundation in early life. That sense that you can just sort of trust the world.
It's one of the few towns in America that had fewer bars than it had churches. As a child, God was very real to me.
By the power of our living God.
We had angels, demons. I could imagine Satan's army. My dad said that we all have a guardian angel that keeps those demons at bay. You imprint that on a 3-year-old's brain, and there's just no doubt.
At the time, we were in summer school. We did arts and crafts, ceramics. We got to go swimming. I remember we had actually started a petition so that we could have an extra 2 weeks of summer school because we were having so much fun. We did not want it to end. I have a large family. I'm third youngest in a family of 11. And that day, I had 3 siblings on the bus and 2 cousins. We were little innocent children.
Okay, load up. Yeah.
Where are we going?
We're going home. Take you home.
Ed Ray was the driver that day. He was a local farmer.
You could tell this man was bucking his own hay, yet he was so kind.
He knew all the kids by first name, knew most of their parents. There's not a one of them that didn't want to hug his neck when they got on the bus.
I remember Mom would come get me every day at noon all summer. And the day before the kidnapping, I got into my mom's beer and tried to make some popcorn, almost burnt the house. She walked in and said, "Okay, Mike, well, your punishment is, you know, you're gonna have to ride the bus home tomorrow." That day, I was out in the orchard with the teacher's daughter, messing around and stuff, and the buses are starting to leave at 3:30. And she's like, "You better go get on the bus. Buses are leaving." And so I took off running and flagged down the last bus leaving, which was Edwards.
Bending over miles of cotton, finally ruined my daddy's back. As he overcompensated.
When we loaded up on the bus, I went to the very back so that I could be rowdy and talk with my friends. I was a very outgoing, outspoken child, and I was constantly getting in trouble on the bus for talking.
As he pulled me through that hot Chowchilla dust.
My brother Jeff was also on the bus. He was 1 year ahead of me in school, an honor roll student, basically an all-American kid.
Jeff was right in front of me, by the way. He was a sweetheart. He was my 10-year-old boyfriend.
As a child, I was hyperactive. I was such a problem on the bus. You couldn't keep me in a seat. And me being me, I forgot to take my meds that day. I was moving seats, bugging this person and hitting this person and pulling this person's hair. My sister, Andrea, was sitting by me on the bus. She was getting me to relax. Basically, she was my best friend.
I remember a lot of the girls had a crush on the 14-year-old cowboy, Michael Marshall. He was definitely a handsome 14-year-old boy.
Never heard of him. Never really seen him before. Here's this kid who comes out of complete obscurity for the sole purpose that God knew what was about to happen. We were driving home. As usual, we were dropping kids off along the way. We're in the middle of the orchards and fields. We turned this corner, and Edray stopped.
I'd like you to tell me in your own words first. When you're riding the bus, just tell me what you remember.
There was this white van parked on the road, and then two guys jumped out with guns. And one told him to open his door. So he opened the door. And then the guy got in. He had a pantyhose over his head. He told Edward to go to the back of the bus.
When Edward opened the door, one of the kids, Jeff Brown, he got up and said, "We didn't do it." And everybody kind of laughed.
He thought it was a joke. I was scared, so I ducked under my seat.
Edray got up and he moved to the back. I went back over to my sister, Andrea. I held her hand.
The guy with a shotgun, he's staring at me with his gun.
They told everybody in the first 3 seats to go to the back of the bus, and I was in the 4th seat. Everybody was scared.
They kept their gun pointed in the direction of all of us children. So it was the whole time pointed at the children.
Even more scary was the pantyhose that they had pulled over their face.
They were tight, smashed their nose down. Their eyes were hollow. It reminded me of demons.
And then all of a sudden, we're driving, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. If I can figure out the why, then maybe I can figure out a way to interrupt what's going to come next. And we drive a little further, and the guy runs the bus into a big slough.
It was a deep incline. We were jostled all over the place. When we finally stopped, we saw another van. Now there was a white van and a green van.
The van drove right back to the door of the bus. And then they had all the kids on the right-hand side go into the white van.
In that first group of children was my brother. He turned and looked at me down the aisle. He gave me that look of, you just need to be quiet. And so I did. I had seen enough TV shows that I knew that this was serious.
I was the first one to get into the van. Going through the door, there's another guy standing there like a statue, pointing his gun straight through. So you had to go by him. They had plywood all inside the van so that you couldn't see out or anything.
And then they backed the second van up to the bus. And the other kids, we got in that van. I was scared because there was absolutely no communication from them on where we're going or what they're gonna do with us.
And then they shut the doors.
I had fixed Michael bacon and tomato sandwiches for dinner. And about 4:30, I started looking for the bus. It didn't come.
About 4:30, I got a phone call from a parent that the children hadn't arrived home after school. I thought they've had a flat tire, the bus is broken down or something like that. Then we received several more calls.
In 1976, the sheriff's office had one patrol officer in Chowchilla. There was only one little bitty office and one phone. When the call came in that the bus was missing, I said, what do you mean missing? How does a school bus, all painted yellow in a small county, show up missing? I put out all points bulletin. It was a summer session, so the bus driver didn't take the normal route that he would take to drop children off. So we had to check everywhere.
I went all the way to the school, backtracked, looked down every street, every which way, didn't see anything. I knew something was wrong. The parents were congregating at the police station because we were getting really anxious.
We're trying to locate 26 lost children along with their driver.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think that something major like this could happen in Chowchilla.
It seemed like we were driven around for like hours upon hours.
It was hot in that van. It was just stifling.
Kids got sick from the motion of the vehicle and no food, no water. I just felt like an animal being taken to slaughter. If you as a child can be thrown into the back of a van without any comforts, they didn't care about us.
I told a few of my little friends, and I told them be brave because everything's gonna be all right.
We thought that they might be back there killing the guys in the bus because we didn't know what they were doing to them.
I was separated from my three sisters. Were they alive? Did they get left behind?
Andrea and I were together. I took her hand. There was some security there.
We prayed.
We sang, "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." Nobody clapped their hands.
All of us have a wall against getting totally overwhelmed. And that wall is our defenses, our coping mechanisms, humor. And when the wall gets broken, that's trauma.
They wouldn't let us use the restroom. I held myself all day. I was in tears because I was in physical pain. Jeff didn't want me to be embarrassed because he knew I was embarrassed. And so Jeff wet his own pants and took my hand and placed my hand on his lap. He said, "Look, I went. You can go ahead and go."
Edward was very quiet. I think he comprehended that this was a serious situation.
The kids were asking me, questions of when they were going to see their mommies and daddies, and I think that they believed that I would tell them the truth. I told them, "Yes, you will." And I didn't lie. I didn't tell them what lifetime it might be.
We were looking for him everywhere. Then I recalled that one of my sergeants, he didn't have an airplane, but he had another buddy that did. So I asked him to get up in a plane.
My dad, Robert Gudgel, was well known as a local aviator, and he approached Dan right here to augment the search.
I remember going out, flying the airplane out over the ash slough, looking for the bus.
Dad took Brenda Slough down here to the south, and Dad is the one that spotted it. It was difficult to see from the ground because the sloughs had quite a bit of trees.
They knew something was terribly wrong at that point when they found the empty bus.
I couldn't understand it. I actually looked up in the sky. UFOs, what? Where are the kids? Where's Michael?
This was a major case. I called Governor Jerry Brown's office. I said, "I want every state agency that has cars and radios in my office." I said, "You got it." In the meantime, nearby counties said, "What do you need? We'll help you any way we can." And set up roadblocks.
We were driving around for, seemed like hours and hours and hours, until they finally stopped.
And started hearing sawing and hammering.
And then all of a sudden the door flies open.
They took Ed Ray out first.
And then they grab one of the kids. Door flies shut again.
A few minutes would go by, they'd reach in and grab another kid. And I scooted myself way to the front of the van again. I was trying to survive at that point.
I felt helpless. That, to me, was one of the scariest, because now we're going to find out what's going on.
When you opened the doors, what did you see?
I saw, it was kind of like a tent, but it had 3 sides and it had roof on it.
They had built this structure and covered it with some kind of a tarp, and they had backed the van underneath the structure, and so it was enclosed. I remember that my knees gave a little bit just from not having stood up for so long. They asked me my name. I couldn't pronounce my R's, so I was Lewy Poke, and that's how they wrote it down.
They asked me my name and my age, and they took my shirt. So at that point, it was just me and my pink fuzzy swimsuit.
They took my purse, white leather purse, which had a little address book, and I thought, are you giving these guys who are pointing guns at you your address and phone number where they can get the rest of your family?
Finally came down to meeting this little Monica, and she was 4 years old. Hardest part that sticks out in my head was I had to either hand her over to them or leave her there. And I couldn't hand her over.
They escorted me to where there was a hole in the ground with a ladder coming out. I looked down the ladder and I could see Ed Ray. The kidnappers gave him one flashlight. I did not want to go down there. I knew if I went down that hole, I was never coming back out. Time froze. And then Ed Ray grabs my ankle and says, come on, son, it'll be okay. And I climbed down into there.
Inside this hole that we were in the dark again. You couldn't really comprehend at that point where you were. I found my brother, so I knew that he was alive.
My sisters were there.
When they let Monica come down, I was relieved.
Some of the younger children were whimpering and crying. I remember Jody Heffington was one of the older girls who tried to keep the younger kids calm somewhat and composed. Some people just had that personality of an older sister figure that was there to help.
I look around. There are some mattresses and some blankets. There's a table in the back and it has water around it. I remember thinking I wanted that water so bad.
And there was some food. They had cereal, peanut butter, bread.
For us to use the restroom, they had cut out holes.
But we were okay, at least for now. We're okay. We're all alive. We're all back together.
Suddenly, they dropped like a manhole cover over the hole.
That's when I started hearing that dirt. You know, and we were being covered up, buried alive, you know.
I was a young news director at KQED, the public television station. So the news of the kidnapping came to me on a wire machine. I realized that this was a big story. It was probably the story of the decade, possibly the story of the century.
The news media just flooded the place.
The phone lines were jammed, both with reporters and with anxious parents. It was a great story for reporters, a terrible event for parents.
Good evening. There may never have been as anguishing a mystery.
It was covered everywhere.
The bus has been found. There are no signs of violence, and there are only horrified guesses as to what may have happened.
It led the newscasts.
Still no break in that Chowchilla, California school bus kidnapping.
It was internationally covered. But in those early hours, of course, nobody knew anything.
There are lots of theories as to why. You tell me what the theories are, I will select one. We have no theories at all.
What would you say about the possible motive, then? Do you have a theory as to what it was?
I don't really have. Every half hour, ABC, CBS, NBC, all of them come in to what you can tell us.
Given that all we got, frankly, it's a very baffling case because we don't know any motive.
This morning, authorities organized more search parties, but were still at a loss for an explanation.
It was a crime beyond imagination, with reporters trying to get information in any way possible.
Debbie Zylstra was the last child to be let off the bus before it disappeared.
Had you ever seen any cars following the bus before?
No,
Do you have any idea who might have done that?
no,
Did you see anything after the bus let you off?
nope.
The sheriff says the only thing he has ruled out at this point is the possibility of a flying saucer. And there are those in this area who don't rule out that possibility either.
There were people calling in with conspiracy theories. I remember talking to one person going on and on about the son of Sam.
Must have received at least 1,000 calls thinking it was a Zodiac killer or Moon up in Oregon.
I mean, in the last few years, we've become used to terrorist activity in this country, unfortunately so.
It's a political act.
That's speculation, sir. Your guess is as good as mine at this point.
You could hear these like exhaust fans, and if you went to the sides, you could feel air coming in. Not air-conditioned air, but warm air circulating.
To me, there was just very little air. Very hard to breathe.
After so many hours, it just becomes desperate.
Edward yells up, "Would you please open the door? I beg of you. Purdy, please, let us out. I got a blank check. If that'll help any." Then he says, "Everybody here say pretty please." So we all start saying that. And the guy wouldn't answer us.
Ed Ray and Mike Marshall took the flashlight and really started looking around. Every crack and every crevice, they're looking at the walls, they're looking at the cracks in the ceiling.
The only way we could get out was go through the top. All the little kids, they started saying, "Try and move it." Edward didn't want to because we thought we'd get hurt if they caught us trying to get out.
We begged Edward, please try. You've got to try. We're going to die in here. You've got to get us out.
Ed Ray put his hands up and he pushed on it a little bit. Ed Ray is a stout man, but man, it was not moving.
The water was running out. Nobody's come to find us. And then the batteries on whatever fans they had going, they just stopped.
I remember Andrea was sitting by herself praying. Ed Ray got us all to calm down. He had all 26 of us take a nap. I don't know if it was the heat, but I kept going back to camping trips that I had had with my family. I could see the water. Waiting for that monster fish. I could see us gathering around the campfire. I could smell the smoke.
In the past, hallucinations were attributed to viruses, head injuries, but what hadn't been known before Chowchilla is that pure fright, getting scared to death, could make you hallucinate. One little child saw right through the ceiling of the hole, right through all the rocks and the dirt that had been piled on, and saw the scene of kidnappers sleeping above them. That was a complete mirage, and that came from being traumatized.
When I woke up, something was wrong. Dirt was coming in, dust.
It made like a little like that. What's going on?
The only thing holding the roof in place were 4x4s, one on the ceiling, and then a post holding it up. You could hear the screeching of the metal and the roof just gave.
It was terrifying. There was dust and dirt that was flying everywhere.
Thought we were gonna die right there. That's when we thought we would smother to death. And then it finally stopped. But anyone that touched that beam, the sand would trickle in. So we couldn't move. We had to stay put wherever we were at. We knew we wouldn't last much longer in there.
Good evening. The California National Guard today joined state and local police and the FBI in a giant search for 26 California children. There are no real clues, only an eerie silence in a frightening and bizarre case.
Throughout much of this day, parents and other family of the missing children came to the command post set up in downtown Chowchilla.
At that time, there was 100 people waiting for word, and it was scary.
I want to express to you the governor's concern and my concern. The California Highway Patrol, the state police, and if necessary, the National Guard are available to assist in the search.
When somebody disappears for that long and you have no word whatsoever on where they might be, you're scared to death.
Do you have other children? I do, and I would have had 2 children on that bus, but she woke up sick yesterday morning, and I didn't send her. And she was so far.
My husband, Bob, he was in Canada at the Calgary Stampede. He was practically in tears trying to get home. I was able to sleep for a while, but as soon as I opened my eyes, it was like a ton of bricks hit me.
I guess now all that we can do is to join with the families and loved ones of those involved and pray hard for their safe recovery.
We begged Edward, please try. You've got to try. We're going to die in here. You've got to get us out.
I remember Edward saying that it looked like we were going to have to stay down there and kick the bucket.
Edward was fearful that his actions could cause harm not only to him, but to us. But Mike didn't have that sense of hopelessness.
You know, a little fear kind of hits you, but at the same time, it generates more power. I was trying to process it all. And I thought to myself, if we're gonna die getting the hell out of here. You know, we're gonna die trying.
They started stacking up mattresses to get to the top. Even a lot of the younger kids took turns doing whatever it is that their young little bodies could do. We're not gonna die. This is not how we're gonna end.
Jody's job was to shine the flashlight while Michael went up and with all his might gave his cowboy push.
All the kids are, come on, Mike. You can do it, Mike. And I don't feel it move or see it move, but all the kids, I just heard them say, it moved, it moved.
For the first time, I felt hope. Kind of wondered if he was my angel, my guardian angel that Dad talked about.
At that point, we said, Edward, you have to help him. We got to get out of here. We're going to die. We're going to suffocate in here.
Edward was fearful that somebody was up there just waiting.
But he finally went over and helped.
Ed Ray started pushing with everything he had. They knew something was on it, but we didn't know what it was. And so he pushed up And he got that manhole cover up maybe about yay high. And Mike Marshall stuck his arm through there and started feeling around to see what was on top of the manhole cover. Mike got his hand in there and just started doing this. And together, they moved that manhole cover back just far enough that a corner of a battery could be seen. That's not the battery in your car. These bus batteries weigh about 125, 150 pounds. Had Ed Ray slipped, had Ed Ray lost his grip, Mike Marshall would have lost his arm.
I remember them saying, watch out, and these two huge batteries were dropped down on the stack of mattresses.
And then Ed Ray had a good look. Around this hole, they made a square box, 3 feet high, something like that. And that was so that as they were covering the van with dirt, that they wouldn't cover up the hole.
Edward squeezes me through this half-foot hole. I get on top of it. I start pounding on this box.
There was a box up there, and he tried to bang his way out, but he couldn't do it. And then they got me up there with him. We both tried with our backs to push out, push up. We couldn't do it, so Mike tried with his feet and I tried with my back, and still we couldn't do it.
All the seams were pretty well connected. Mike said, we need something to pry it with.
I kicked apart a box spring mattress and was using the wood.
So Robert got up there with me for a while, and we started hitting and pounding.
Mike would slam that corner over and over and over. It just seemed impossible.
I start digging underneath the plywood. And I realized after I do that for a while, the material, rock and stuff, is falling down outside of the plywood into the hole I'm digging. I thought maybe I could get weight off the top. Then I can pull it out and I can scoop it down inside the hole.
He was kicking dirt, throwing dirt. He kept digging.
I don't know how Mike maneuvered up in that wooden box. I don't know how long he was up there. It was hours.
Our sense of time under scary conditions is one of the most vulnerable senses that we have. The child who held the light knew it was a long, long time.
I was, drained, tired. I had no energy. I was exhausted. My equilibrium was totally off. I didn't know what was up or down. That's when Edward started, pretty please don't hurt him, pretty please don't hurt him. I could hear that in my ears ringing over and over. Pretty please don't hurt him, he doesn't know what he's doing, and I'm starting to believe that they are up there. That to me was scary. I tried to see if I could get any weight off the top. It moved like just a crack, and I looked through it, and plain as day, I was going up, and a door opening, and beyond that was just pure darkness. And you could tell there was somebody in that darkness. I remember it vividly.
This was a hallucination that he had dug into no place, that they were still in horrible trouble, that they were going to die anyway. So he went back down and he sat down and he thought, well, what am I digging for? This is terrible. I can't do this. And then he decided, I'm going to go up there anyway.
It took a little break there, but then something clicked in me. I said to myself, you're a cowboy. You're going to get on that crazy-ass horse. You're going to do whatever it is you got to do. I didn't care if they were up there. I wasn't going to give up. From that point on, it didn't matter.
I started hitting stuff, hitting and pounding and hitting and pounding. And I pulled the chip out. And then there was a big crack. I cracked the ceiling. And then I almost got it open. Just pulled some more and cracked it again.
It was the most beautiful ray of sunlight that I had ever seen.
I just remember the light and the air. So much air and cool air. Not knowing if they're up there, I kept thinking, we're getting creamed or we're getting out. And I think that's why I didn't hesitate to stick my head out as soon as I had it broke off. Going up above the hole, I had no real sense where it was. I could see trees, and I felt like we were in the mountains. There was nobody there.
I remember getting out and looking around. Off in the distance was a big building. And I was worried about that building because maybe the kidnappers were over there.
Edward got all the kids together, said we need to be quiet. And so, like a bunch of little ducks, we're just walking through the sand.
There were 27 of us, and if they are around here, we're pretty easy target to see.
But then we saw someone coming toward us, and I did not know who it was or what they wanted.
And the guy's face was just like, oh my God, I saw you on the news. Where in the hell did you come from?
It turned out to be in a rock quarry.
And in no time, the klaxon started sounding. They had set off their alarm.
The children have been found. They are in good shape. The bus driver has been found. He is in good shape. There's no indication of any harm.
Detective Bernie Servey and I were the first two, as I recall, to arrive and make contact with the bus driver and the kids. Kids were actually, for the most part, calm. They were a little bit dirty looking, obviously, because they were buried in the ground.
We were in this big warehouse. I remember they had a water cooler. I would take my little cup and I would pour it on my head. And then I'd fill it up and I'd pour it on my head, trying to get the dirt off me.
That evening, we had the television on, and I thought I heard him say kids from Chowchilla had been found. I ran in there, jumped over the coffee table, turned the TV up, and sure enough. And I was so thankful.
My son, Michael, is 14 and he's alive and well and he's coming home and I can't wait to see him.
What's the last 24 hours been like?
Not very nice. I wouldn't want to have to go through them again, ever.
We had to decide how we're going to proceed with the interviews and things, and we decided it was best to get them to a secure location.
So we rode just a very short distance to a prison. They sat us down at all these little desks, and they had apples and cartons of milk.
We were given inmate jumpsuits, their white jumpsuits to wear.
All us little kids got into them, and we had to roll the pants of about 10 feet. We sitting there flapping our arms. We said, hey, we can fly, and we pretend like we were gonna fly.
And then the police came in and talked to us.
Here's the situation. Go ahead. Now, I would generally describe them in very high spirits.
Yeah.
They talk to their parents? We ask who wants to be talked to next, and they all put up their hand, and they're very jovial.
After that, they got us loaded up in a Greyhound bus to go home to Chowchilla. When we got through Chowchilla, there were lights everywhere, people everywhere, just a sea of people.
It was just a mob.
Right. Take your light out.
A very nice gentleman carried me off the bus and put me in my mom's arms. And I put my head on her shoulder.
It's wonderful. You can't say there's enough words to describe how it feels. I'm just so happy I can cry.
Come here, Mike. Reporters are all over asking me what happened. And I started to talk to him, and then just out of nowhere, Principal Tatum stepped in and said, why don't we just give him a break, boys, let him go home and get some sleep. And so we got in the car and left. There was my chance to tell the world what happened to getting out and everything. And I didn't do it. I let the grown-ups do it.
7 o'clock, we got dug out. I handed the kids up to the other boys, and we got out. We all got home safe.
As miraculously as they had disappeared, the children of Chowchilla returned to their parents due to the heroic efforts of their bus driver, Ed Ray.
We were home, but the kidnappers were still out there.
You knew they were someplace, but you didn't know where. It was still a mystery. You had no answers to this mystery.
I had 100 agents out there following leads on who might have done this. I had all the state, I had all the FBI, and my own people, of course, too.
The following morning, I was directed to go out to the site where they were buried. I had a whole crew of people looking for any evidence we could get.
This is a place where they've cut a hole in the roof and made an exit and ingress and egress.
The only people into the hole have been a couple of sheriff's criminalists. The sheriff's office is working very carefully because they hope to find clues which will lead them to the kidnappers.
The crime scene was a mysterious hole in the ground. There was some notion that it might be a cave, an underground room. It took us a while to understand that it was, in fact, a moving van. By today's standards, it wasn't a 40-foot van. It was a fairly short 27-foot moving van. When you think about it, to have 26 kids confined in that kind of a chamber, I was flabbergasted.
The search for these suspects is now, of course, what is preoccupying authorities. Being sought are 3 men and 2 vans.
We don't know what color they are now. They were purchased in November in Alameda. Information on the registration is all phony, so we don't know who we're looking for yet.
At that time, we were looking for any information we could get.
We had multiple conversations with law enforcement.
One man saw what color hair did you have?
Kind of blonde.
My brother and I helped with composite drawings to help identify the kidnappers.
This is the latest composite. We have no names whatsoever at this point. Is this from the memory of the children? Yes.
And then information had been developed on the investigative side about the vans.
The kidnapped vans were found in a one-story commercial building in southeast San Jose. Reports say a rental agent told police a young man rented the place about 6 months ago.
The bus driver, Ed Ray, was brought to the warehouse by authorities. It is assumed Mr. Ray will attempt to identify those vans.
When they recovered the vehicles, they also recovered other key pieces of evidence. They found a 12-gauge shotgun, which is probably the one that was used when they made the stop of the school bus.
We found lumber material, the same lumber as 2x4s that were picked up at the quarry, number of mattresses, the same mattresses that had been put into the trailer.
They also located a Cadillac that had been completely spray painted flat black, even the hubcaps. It was very strange.
Did you see them working on these things? Were they painting? What were they doing inside there?
I don't know.
Did they talk?
I can't see through the wall.
They recovered what looked like some kind of a journal, diary. They had encrypted it into some kind of unusual writing.
Never seen anything like that in my life.
I was scared. I was actually still scared of those kidnappers. Where they're at, what they're doing, are they following us? They know where we live, they know our addresses, they know our phone numbers. It was really overwhelming for me.
A lot of them are scared to let their kids out of the house. I know my wife's got a girlfriend across town that says she won't let her kids out of the house.
We were in a panic. We did not like sleeping in the windows, and every sound sent us running.
The first real breaks in the case came when the former employee from the quarry called up and said that he had made notes in a ledger that they maintained during their patrols, that he had seen men working with a Cat bulldozer, and he also noted that there were 2 moving vans parked on the site. One time he said he found a young man working in one of the scrapyard areas, and when he confronted that individual, he found his identification, said that he was Frederick Woods, and he was the son of the owner.
One of the things we learned was that the Woods family, they weren't from the Central Valley, they were from the Bay Area, from the very nicest suburbs of the Bay Area. In fact, Woods has an illustrious double name, Frederick Newhall Woods.
When the gold rush was happening in California, Henry Newhall ended up amassing a great fortune, 148,000 acres up and down the state of California. Railroad towns were named after him.
They owned Magic Mountain.
Why would these people be involved? Was it a thrill crime?
Next day, I was asked to serve a search warrant on the Woods estate. When we opened these doors up and went into the actual mansion, everything in there was expensive. Very fancy cut crystal, statues.
The place was littered, literally, with old vehicles.
It had antique Rolls Royces and Bentleys, all kinds of military war surplus type Jeeps. It was really something to see. There was a separate building opposite the mansion. It was a series of garages. We had been told that Fred slept above the garages. We went upstairs.
The place was full of junk. You could barely walk across the room. Old movie cameras, there was a bunch of them all over the place.
And there was a desk, and that's where he had a kind of an envelope, like a manila type envelope. It had the plan, the actual plan of how the sequence of the kidnapping was supposed to go down.
And inside that, there was a jack-in-the-box bag that on the back side of it had been written the names and the ages of all of the children. But probably the most telling evidence was the ransom note that was found in that envelope. And at that point, it started to gel as to who was responsible for this.
Fred Woods, the suspect's father, was very cooperative. Told me he tried to get his son interested in the family business. His son got interested in these old cars.
He developed a business of refurbishing old cars and selling them. He had gone into partnership with a friend from high school named James Schoenfeld. His brother, Rick Schoenfeld, was involved, but he was more of a hanger-on to the other two.
The brothers, their father was a foot specialist. They were upper middle class.
They're always very polite and outgoing, and if we saw them outside, they always chatted with us. Very friendly boys.
We were really shocked that these were three young men that came from very affluent families. I was dumbstruck.
Why do you suppose that they would do something like that?
I don't know. They didn't have enough love.
Fred Woods is, what was he after money for? He had more money than the town had.
Now we know who these people are, so we just followed our noses.
Acting on evidence discovered at the house, law enforcement authorities have just issued all points bulletins.
Suspects are considered armed and dangerous. Arrest on probable cause.
The investigators worked 24 hours a day and found out that Fred and James Schoenfeld took off. Fred went to Vancouver. He used a fake ID to get in, checked into a hotel. While Woods is up in Canada, he's writing letters from a post office asking friends for money. Jim Schoenfeld drove his car up to the border and tried to enter the border. He had weapons in the car, but they didn't arrest him. They bought him a soda, they were nice to him.
Gave him the guns back and turned him around.
Good evening. The FBI is looking all over the country tonight for Frederick Woods and James Schoenfeld, two of the three men suspected of kidnapping 26 children in California last week. The third man, Schoenfeld's younger brother, turned himself in.
In Oakland, California last night, Richard Allen Schoenfeld surrendered. He walked into the Alameda County District Attorney's office along with his father and a lawyer. The attorney said Richard surrendered for his own protection.
James tried to get into Canada one more time. He had gotten rid of most of the weapons, but he had one more weapon that he didn't know about that Fred had hidden in the vehicle. So they turned him around, finally gave up on that and started heading back home.
James Schoenfeld was captured at dawn today. His lawyer said he'd gotten tired of running, had called and said he'd turned himself in at 8 this morning. Police closed in an hour before that.
The third suspect, Fred Woods, was arrested at the main Vancouver post office after Royal Canadian Mounted Police had been tipped by the FBI. They say the 24-year-old suspect was unarmed and did not put up a fight. He appeared nervous, a little cocky, but mostly disinterested in talking to reporters.
No comment. What do you think about the charges against you? No comment.
Any concerns about going to California at all?
Would you?
The kidnappers had hit this town right in its heart by taking those children.
The community took it quite personal. Saying we were upset is very, very mild. It was voiced around town that, quote, all we need is a good old-fashioned street hanging, unquote. Literally, that was said.
These were three men who were so hated, stationed on top of the police station, a sniper, on top of City Hall, a sniper, all in the means of protecting them.
Inside, both Woods and James Schoenfeld spoke with a firm voice, showing no fear. They were ordered held on $1 million bond each.
The biggest question in this bizarre case is still unanswered. Were there political motives, psychological motives, motives of revenge? No one seems to know.
When I interviewed Fred, he said that he and his dad weren't very close. He wasn't doing what his dad expected him to do. They were always bickering about him dropping out of college, and he wanted his own money, so he didn't have to rely on his father.
Turn to your left.
James told me that they were going to make a movie to make money, and that's how the whole thing started.
They turned out a movie script called Chain Reaction, and it was an amalgam of the Patty Hearst kidnapping case, the French Connection, and Dirty Harry.
You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
And it didn't happen.
During this time, they also learned that the state had a surplus of funds. So they tried to think of how can we get ransom from the state. So then that led them to kidnapping a school bus because the state runs the school system.
Again, they were obviously influenced by the original Dirty Harry movie.
Roll, 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 your boys are men, we're doing it, you think?
In the final scenes of the movie, you had an individual who hijacks a bus full of children, and they end up in a rock quarry.
Fred was the leader who started it.
But Fred didn't have the ability to plan something like this by himself. And he thought that Jim Schoenfeld probably was the more efficient planner, and in fact, he's the one who wrote the journal that was found at a storage unit.
When they decoded these writings, James Schoenfeld was asking himself what would happen as a result of this crime. James had to make a decision. He decided to make money with Fred Woods. For 18 months, they were researching different targets. They had maps where they circled all the schools they were considering. They were able to get identification and different names to purchase the things they needed. They went out to the quarry in the cover of darkness to bury an entire transport van. They obtained weapons, many, many weapons. To collect the ransom money, they wanted the government to fly the ransom money and drop it at a location.
They had intended to have an airdrop over the Santa Cruz Mountains. In fact, the Cadillac was intended to be used to pick up the ransom money, and they wanted it not to be seen. They wanted it to blend in for a nighttime operation. All the way through, they thought that they had thought of everything.
But the night of the kidnapping, they weren't able to call in their ransom demand because the phone lines were so jammed. They decided to go home. Fred Woods had a late night dinner with his parents, like any other night. Then the news came out that the children had freed themselves.
The children are home.
Rick and James Schoenfeld came over to the property and planned their escape from there.
When the children escaped, that kind of destroyed their whole plan right there.
With all three suspects behind bars, the grateful townspeople today honored their hometown hero.
The local politicians decided that we needed to celebrate the heroes that came from this horrendous event. And so the town had what they called Ed Ray Day.
Me and 25 kids have something to give to Ed.
Thank you. Oh.
Edward was a very humble man. He didn't ask for the publicity, and he didn't ask for all the attention that came his way. The press assumed that Edward saved us, and he, from that point on, was the hero, and that is true. Edward kept us all together, and Edward helped us get out. But Edward was not the only hero.
I was telling people Mike Marshall dug us out. It was Mike that dug us out, but nobody was listening.
That day, I could see that Michael was really depressed.
I remember thinking to myself, why am I feeling like this? What's wrong with me? Hey, you know what? Who cares? We all got out. We're all out. That's what matters. I felt guilty for feeling bad.
Mike was not gonna boast about what he did. That just wasn't Mike.
All the children know. We all know the story. We were there for it. So we do know what everybody did and everybody's role. But I don't think any of us really went out and spoke. We were just children.
We were still just trying to process what happened.
That day was supposed to be the day of honoring us. They put a plaque in there with all of our names. But a lot of us were still in that hole.
When we got home, I thought life would be okay. Even though the kidnappers were actually arrested, it didn't stop my mind from going over what happened, what could have happened. I can remember having nightmares immediately. My mom tells me that I started sleepwalking, and I would come into their room just in shock and tell them they're killing me.
We're driving down the road and there happens to be a van, whether it's telephone company or PG&E or just a vehicle beside the road. Go on past, Mama, don't stop, don't slow down.
My self-esteem at that point just really started to go down.
I hated sleeping. I hated going to sleep because every night I was having nightmares. I could hear Andrea screaming. She could hear me screaming, "Mom, Mom, Mom!" Those demons were gonna keep us forever.
I knew Michael was having trouble. He was also screaming and hollering in his sleep.
I put myself back in there, thinking about how I was gonna die.
Our family was just turned inside out. Didn't know how to fix it. Didn't know who to talk to about it. We left, went on the road, tried to forget it, get past it. And the school did not offer any help to those kids, like counseling, whatever.
I can't visibly see any problem now. Whether or not, there's some psychological scars, I certainly wouldn't know. But, it's just kind of on the surface. I can't pull anything out.
Not once. The kids were totally forgotten.
There was no ground laid for anything like this yet. Back then it was, go to Disneyland.
Go to Disneyland.
A Lions Club group in Los Angeles paid for a trip to Disneyland as a way to somewhat overcome the trauma that we had faced. And so it was, for a moment, a chance to get away from Chowchilla and go see Mickey and Minnie.
They held a parade for us. I believe the way our parents were convinced was that they were giving us therapy, some kind of therapy.
The trip to Disneyland was an intrusion into the nightmare. That's all it was.
In 1976, there was a word childhood trauma out there, but nobody knew exactly what it was.
When one is traumatized, the sense of basic trust goes.
While I was in training as a child psychiatrist, I wanted to find out what happens to children who get frightened to death and don't die. And that started the Chowchilla study.
No one other than Dr. Terr was even trying to be helpful. She told us right up front she was writing a paper for the American Medical Journal. She was interviewing the kids. She also listened to them.
I remember seeing various kinds of statements that were made. The kids were not okay. Somebody got a psychiatrist to come to town, and he made a prediction. He said, one kid in this 26 is going to have a problem. But what happened was that no parent wanted to admit that his kid was the 1 in 26. By the time I got out there, 100% of those kids were having problems.
Mom and Dad were told not to come in when we have nightmares. They said that if they are going in when we have nightmares, that they are rewarding our behavior of having the nightmares, and if they stop rewarding the behaviors, we'll stop having nightmares. Andrea became very introverted. Where she had been outgoing before, she preferred to hide in her room.
Some of them became afraid to really get intimate with anybody.
She would not hug me. I would tell her that I loved her, and she would just ignore it like it was never said.
The Chowchilla children had the worst idea about their futures. In the unconscious, we are indestructible, we are gonna live forever. After trauma, that's not true. You buy it that you're gonna die.
In California yesterday, 3 young men pleaded guilty to the kidnapping a year ago of 26 school children and their bus driver.
The men pled not guilty to different charges that carry a life sentence without parole.
Prosecutor David Minear is also trying to show that there was far more bodily harm inflicted on the kidnapped victims.
Where you have conditions of total darkness, of not enough food or water, extremely hot, conditions of panic among the children, that should be enough to constitute bodily harm, even if you don't have broken bones.
Physically, the children had a bruise or two, there was a cut or two. They had a little bit of urinary trouble, which cleared up. So the defense said no harm.
As you gentlemen who have seen the transcript know, there's very little physical damage at all. And practically it's non-existent.
What about the emotional damage that they talked about? Is that possible?
There is no case in California that I know of that holds that emotional damage is bodily injury.
I couldn't believe it. The mind and the brain, that's not bodily harm? What you do to a person's mind, what you do to a young child's developing mind?
Bus driver Ed Ray was among the early arrivals at the Alameda County Courthouse, closely followed by some of the children who were kidnapped with him in July of last year.
So the children had to be brought in, had to testify about the injuries that they sustained. They had to face the kidnappers in that courtroom.
I can remember my mom saying that the kidnappers would be in the room. I was so scared.
Ed Ray explained how he and the children were placed in 2 airless vans and how the children wept and he feared suffocation. Jody Heffington fell to tears on the witness stand as she attempted to tell her story of the kidnapping and being entombed underground.
When they took me into the courtroom, I can remember sitting in the jury box and I felt like I could barely see because I was so little. I remember not looking at the kidnappers, like, I'm gonna do what I gotta do and I'm gonna get out of here. I told them the harm that they caused to us was because of the conditions that they put us in. And as I finished and I walked out, I just started bawling.
It was extremely brave of them to take the stand.
You think they should ever be released?
No, I don't think they should.
Why?
Did you know they was going to come back and release us if we didn't get out? We was buried under the ground, man.
After 16 days of grueling testimony, Judge Deegan found all 3 men guilty. Deegan, this was an ordeal of terror, and that to me causes suffering. Suffering is, in itself, physical harm.
Finding out that my kidnappers got life without the possibility of parole was exactly what we had hoped for.
But just when survivors felt that they could find some sort of peace with it, the kidnappers filed appeals, and in 1980, the appellate court agreed and reversed the sentence.
The kidnappers had plenty of money and plenty of time and a very good attorney and said mental harm isn't bodily harm.
They could be out after 25 years. We thought we were safe, you know?
That was, and still is, like a slap in the face.
What was the worst part of it for you?
I really didn't think we were going to get out. My brother did. But I didn't think we were going to get out because I didn't know what was going to happen to us or if they'd ever let us out or if we'd run out of food or die or what. I just figured that was it.
After the trial was done, I couldn't progress past the kidnapping. My self-esteem took a large blow. I didn't want anybody knowing everything that I had been through, but everybody in Chowchilla knew about the kidnapping. So I had a lot of eyes watching me at that point in time. And then, unfortunately for us, 5 years after the kidnapping, my brother was in an industrial accident with my dad, and my brother was killed.
About 300 people attended Jeff's funeral, many standing outside because the chapel was full.
I felt so betrayed by God that he got me through the kidnapping and then took away my beloved brother. The spotlight was on us again. We had reporters at our house all the time. My small family at that point crumbled. My parents divorced. That small town became so suffocating for me that I couldn't go to school without stares. I couldn't go to school without people talking behind my back. I couldn't go to school without somebody saying, "I am so sorry." And my mom and I made the decision to leave Chowchilla. I left during my junior year of high school. I was a class officer. I was a cheerleader. I was involved in everything. I gave it all up so that we could move away and I could be a nobody. I just wanted to be nobody.
When they get to be adults, childhood trauma doesn't just go away. In fact, some of it gets worse.
I was about 19 or 20, going out and getting hammered, blackout, drunk every single night. I just didn't want to remember anymore about the kidnapping. I just wanted it to go away.
Around the 4 or 5 year mark, he was in trouble as a rodeo rider. It was such a shame that he had lost this pride in himself. And some of that pride from having been the kid's hero had been robbed from him by the town's response. He was never acknowledged.
I didn't know who I was anymore. That cowboy part of me went away. I'm still alive, I can still walk and talk. But still, the way I feel inside me, what they'd done to me, they could never feel what they put us through. Alcohol helped with that in a big way.
Over the years, everything just overwhelmed him. He got more and more into the hole.
I was drinking and using it and all that to the point where I'd been to 7 rehabs, was living in insanity before the kidnapping. And I could see so much light ahead of me, see my future. But then after the kidnapping, I couldn't see anything.
The kidnappers have been having parole hearings since the early 1980s. Many of the survivors wanted to participate in the process. Jody Huffington attended almost every hearing, having to face each of the kidnappers every 5 years.
They did a number of emotional damage to all of us, including our families, our parents. Our lives were never the same after that, ever.
During the kidnapping, Jody Heffington was one of the older girls who was like an older sister figure to a lot of the kids.
She was the one kid who held a flashlight the whole time and stood steady as anything.
She became one of our strongest advocates. Her and Linda Correjo have gotten in the car and driven hours to the Bay Area to be there in person numerous times.
What they did, they should stay there.
It was on the victims to fight for them to be in jail. If they had not been going to parole hearings, they'd have been out in probably 1980-something.
At one hearing, they actually shut me down because I was so angry. One of the guards led me away. It was one thing that they hurt me, but they completely shattered my family. Andrea had dissociated from the family and left Chowchilla. My mom lost faith in my dad as a protector. I was surviving day to day, hated my life, hated myself, and hated everyone around me.
Park has had trouble with the law, spent some time in prison. He's doing better now, he says, but still struggling.
If they want me to believe that they're ready, they're gonna have to let me see them cry. They're gonna have to let me see them cry for me and for my sister and my family.
When they would go to the parole hearings, it would be the responsibility of the victim to say what their story is. My mom talked about how she didn't feel safe around men. Her depression, her struggled with addiction issues. What they don't tell you is that you're not just gonna speak your piece one time. They never got rest.
The kidnappers were denied parole for many, many years. It wasn't until after 2010 that there was public support for them.
A rally was held today in San Francisco by supporters demanding parole for the kidnappers.
Several high-profile politicians and families became involved in advocating for parole. This includes Gavin Newsom's father, who was an appellate judge.
Nobody was physically injured. Huge factor in the case.
And Dale Four, who was part of the investigative team from Madera County when the Chowchilla kidnapping case occurred.
What's right is right. How much time you want out of these guys?
He was one of the people who assured us that none of the kidnappers would ever get out.
He started working for Fred Wood's team. He knew many of the survivors, and at times he approached them and offered them money to come and support parole and to change their position.
He had offered me personally at one point to make some money. He wanted me to write letters in support of parole for the kidnappers. And I let him know I was not the kind of girl that could be bought. The next parole hearing, one of the kidnapped victims showed up with Dale as her support person with letters in support of release.
Don't ask me nothing.
It was a complete, betrayal to everyone.
Over the years, there was an anger building in me that infested absolutely every aspect of my life. I was replaying the kidnapping constantly. I wanted to torture those men. I would fantasize about the different ways that we could get them. I was in a prison of my own making. And I decided to pray. I said, God, forgive them because I can't. God, bless them because I can't. And I realized, God, forgive them because I won't. And God, He said, I can work with the truth. We can move forward from here.
Larry Park decided to go through the restorative justice process, and that's a process that assists survivors that choose to talk to their offender, to come to closure if it helps them.
So I got to go in, and I said, I was your victim for 36 hours. And for the last 38 years, I've been my own victim. I told them that I forgave them, but forgiving them wasn't enough. I had spent my lifetime hating them, and so I asked for their forgiveness.
A man convicted of kidnapping a bus full of children in Chowchilla more than 35 years ago is now free. The California Department of Corrections released Richard Schoenfeld last night from a San Luis Obispo prison. In 1976, he kidnapped 26 children, a crime that held the nation with great concern.
When the youngest kidnapper got out, that's when the panic attacks started happening and the worry, all these feelings come up that you hadn't felt in so long.
I was kind of nauseous and then very tearful because I think first of other children.
I prepared myself because I knew that his brother would be not too soon after that.
After nearly 40 years behind bars, James Schoenfeld will soon be out of prison and on parole. News of the latest release did not go over well with the victims.
Just let all the prisoners who hurt someone and hurt their families, just let them all go.
Jody went into a huge depression. She would say, Linda, it's all my fault. It's all my fault they're getting out. It's all my fault. And I said, we have as much responsibility as you do to keep them in.
She couldn't get out of bed no more. And it was just, she was so weak. Because she was just drinking so much and she wouldn't eat because she was so depressed. And she basically just couldn't process life the way she was supposed to. And my mom just did her best for as long as she could. And it was their fucking fault.
While the Schoenfelds in prison seemed to behave according to the rules, Woods was different.
It was discovered that he was conducting businesses, including a Christmas tree farm, a gold mine, and he continued to purchase and collect cars while he was incarcerated.
He was able to acquire contraband cell phones and use them to conduct the businesses.
The extent that Fred Woods involved himself in every small detail was staggering.
This is a prepaid call from an inmate at the county correctional facility.
Hey, Mike, Fred, what's the deal about the generator being screwed up? Listen, I need a green dot number. Yeah, on the international truck. I sure hope you don't put that California license plate on that truck. Also, the title of that truck is...
One of the more astonishing things that Fred Woods has possession of the two kidnap vans that the children and the bus driver were transported in because he thinks the value will increase because of their notoriety. It's not any sentimental value. It's Fred's continuing obsession, I would call it, with money. It's amazing because he didn't even need the money. The Woods family set up a trust. They wanted to pass on what they could to their son. And it was estimated in one filing to be $100 million. Money that Woods, even as an inmate, had access to.
The hearing came up pretty quick. It was really difficult because we've just recently lost Jody. But the community came together and said, okay, we gotta not just do it for ourselves, do it for Jody and Jeff and each other.
This is the 17th subsequent life parole consideration hearing for Frederick Woods.
Only the inmate and his attorney were in the prison. Everybody else was on remote.
Here we are, wondering if rehabilitation has occurred. Is rehabilitation running businesses out of a jail cell, sneakily smuggling contraband such as cell phones in and out of prison without regard to rules, regulations, and authority?
He should not be released. His mind is still evil, and he is out to get what he wants with no regret for the safety of others. Mr. Woods has not changed for the better in the 45+ years he's been incarcerated.
He's gotten to heal. And my mother was never granted that chance from 1976 to when she died 2 years ago.
The biggest question the commissioners had was from the lead commissioner, who asked why Woods was so fixated on money.
I've always said I needed the money. Well, I didn't need the money, I wanted the money. I've learned that in the last few years. That was a mistake on my part. I was totally wrong with this way of thinking. I've had a thinking change.
I felt that he still wasn't wholly truthful and that he still showed some of the same characteristics that he did at the time he planned this. I wonder if he understands that the trauma, the physical and emotional trauma, is life-altering.
That was really very sad, thinking how we've worked so hard.
I feel that I did everything I could possibly do, but I had to let go of the thought that I had that control. If that kept me in a dark place for too much longer, it would be overwhelming.
The thing about this case that made it unique was the continuing impact of the crime on the children. In 1976, we thought they would just get over it. But all were deeply affected. Dr. Tare once called the children little pioneers of medicine because they so helped in the understanding of childhood trauma.
They paved the way for us to understand more contemporary things. What happens when you force children away from their parents at a border? What happens to children at some of these horrible school shootings?
Because of the Chowchilla kidnapping, there were counselors at Columbine after the shooting. There are counselors at nightclubs after shootings.
Chowchilla children are heroes, and they continue to teach us what childhood trauma is 46, 47, 48, 50 years after the fact.
We are in an area that is prone to tornadoes. It's very common to have a storm shelter. So we actually purchased one. We weren't able to submerge it in the ground because that's just a little bit too traumatic for me. My family knows that it's a struggle for me. They work with me on that. I'm thankful to my parents for encouraging me to try to grow and give back, to show that this one event has not defined me.
I focused on putting my energy towards positive things in my life. So I chose education, and I went back to Chowchilla and taught in Chowchilla at Avi Dairyland. And I take the responsibility. My eyes are always watching the children, making sure they are safe every second in the classroom. I chose making a difference that way.
For 34 years, I was nothing but a survivor. Today, I am a reverend, a Christian counselor, and I am a friend. I wake up in the morning, I say my rosary, and I step out in faith. I never gave up, not completely, because I was taught at 6 years old by a 14-year-old boy, you don't give up. You keep digging. How are you?
Good.
1977 is the last time that I saw Mike Marshall. Do you know, I'm standing with my hero. I can't believe what he did. I still can't believe it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike.
I didn't realize how much it would help me to understand and to actually hear one of the kids tell me that I saved their lives and that they were grateful. Not very many people that, you know, can relate. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a rodeo cowboy like my dad. I would see myself far in the future, rodeoing for a living, but woke up at about 48 years old with a blurry hangover. But then getting sober is amazing. It's to have a life and to be grateful for every day. It's taken a while to come back and rodeo, but once you're a cowboy, you're always a cowboy because it's in your heart. So I'm gonna cowboy up tomorrow and go to this rope in here in Chowchilla and stick some steers.
5, Macy Jones, Jeff Cabral. 6, Adam Silvera, Spencer Mitchell. 7, Tate Dill, Jimmy Joe.
God has a way of making things come full circle in His timing.
Mike, you're up.
Bending over miles of cotton, finally ruined my daddy's back. As he overcompensated for an education lack. As a kid, I rode behind him on his canvas cotton sack. And every day he'd say 500 pounds or bust. As he pulled me through that hot Chowchilla dust. When I grew too big to ride, I got myself an old tow sack. Mama sewed me on a harness and I strapped it on my back. Daddy headed for the fields, and as I stepped into his track, I ain't sure, but I think my mom cussed. As I followed him through that hot Chowchilla dust.